Hi there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Carnes. I'm the programming librarian at the Trimble County Public Library. I'm here right now in the teen room, and this evening I'm going to do a quick talk on herbal folklore. This is a subject I just love to bits. It combines my two probably biggest interests, which is gardening and fairy tales, history, folklore, brings them together. Um, so we're going to explore history, uses, and the secret name of plants. Um, so we'll look at the scientific names of plants, and those names often reveal to us the history and the uses and the characteristics of a plant. St. John's wort is an excellent example of this. And it was really the first one that piqued my interest about the history of a plant. Hypericum perforatum. When you say that, it sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, but it's the lovely and revealing name of St. John's wort. Hypericum refers to over the picture, and this references the tradition of hanging St. John's wort over religious icons during religious festivals. Perforatum refers to the tiny holes that when you hold the leaf up to sunlight, you can see tiny holes in it, and that's part of the plant's respiratory system. To me, the part of the plant's name that refers to its history is just kind of magic. So I grew up, reading fairy tales, listening to fairy tales, things like Rumpelstiltskin, which I'm sure you all remember, where a magical being has its power tied to its name. And so I love learning the history and legends and kind of folklore that are attached to some of these plants, and trying to figure out how these stories were created. My focus is herbs primarily, and I love them. I feel like when we use them, we learn more, we get more in tune with not just our garden, but with ourselves. And like I said, I really enjoy the folklore, and it seems especially rich, tied with herbal plants. My research training has given me a little bit of tools to track down some of the more obscure information attached to these plants. And I'm hoping that after this talk, you will not decide that I have used my librarian skills for evil. But let's go back a little bit more on the plant that first clued me in on the hidden history of plants. As I did more searching about St. John's wort, I found a legend that I think is very funny. It amuses my children. So as we harvest the St. John's wort flowers in the evening, I'll tell my kids that we need to work quickly and not linger, because as legend tells, if you are harvesting St. John's wort flowers as the sun sets, then sky horses will swoop down, carry you off, tear around the sky all night with you, and dump you back in the morning. Children love these stories, and if we share stories like this when we are teaching them how to garden, we can make caring for our little patch of earth more than just a chore. So I encourage you to not only learn these for yourself, but share them if you have them with children or grandchildren. I'm going to take you on a quick tour of my herbal garden and talk about the plants that I have a special affinity for, and their medicinal and culinary ornamental uses that make them kind of a must-have for every garden. We're going to start our tour with parsley, Petroselenium crispum. Its name refers to being grown in the rocks, and that the Greeks called it selenium. Now, according to Greek mythology, the plant sprung up from the blood of a child who has died. He was killed by a serpent. His name was Archemorus. So in his honor, games were held, and athletes wore garlands of parsley. Both Greeks and Romans strongly associated parsley with death. The Romans dedicated the plant to Persephone, queen of the underworld, and they used it to decorate tombs and bodies of the dead. When someone was close to death, word would be sent to the family that the dying person was in need of parsley. And if someone commented, he needs only parsley, it was a kind of euphemism for that the person had one foot in the grave. There are strongly held superstitions surrounding parsley, and one of them cost the Greeks a battle. According to Plutarch, a Roman historian in the 1st century, as the Greeks were preparing to invade an area, the local king, who was just completely outmatched militarily, but he knew something of Greek superstitions, he sent out hundreds of donkeys to meet the Greek army, and he had parsley tied all over the donkeys. Well, the Greeks, seeing this oncoming horde of parsley-covered donkeys, turned and fled in horror. Now, neither the Greeks nor the Romans usually ate parsley, but they did edge their gardens with it, and they had traditions regarding its planting that may be helpful to the modern gardener. Parsley seeds must be planted on Good Friday, and germination can take up to 6 weeks because it is well known that the seeds must travel to and from hell 9 times. Understandably, many don't manage the journey, so you should always plant extra. Parsley plants live 2 years, which isn't very long, so you shouldn't have any reason to move them, which you shouldn't do anyway, because according to legend, moving a parsley plant will bring certain death to your home within a year. Now, it's fun to look at these traditions and wonder what on earth inspired them. I think that the slow and poor germination rates gave rise to the story that the seeds have to travel to and from hell 9 times. But I wonder where, in my research, I wondered where the strong association with death really stemmed from. And I believe that it may have come from some early cases of mistaken identity. It belongs to the same family and looks remarkably similar to hemlock. Hemlock is, of course, very poisonous. And I think hemlock would have served as a better tribute plant to the boy Archimus, whose name meant forerunner of death. But legends aside, fun stories aside, why do I plant it? Butterflies. Butterflies love it. You'll see lots of swallowtails. Salad, it's delicious in salad. And it overwinters beautifully. It'll grow a second year. You'll get excellent vitamins K, C, A, and folate. So I hope you consider bringing it into your garden. Despite its rather dark history, it will nourish you and the butterflies. Next plant I'm going to look at is the king of herbs, which is garlic. The name is Allium sativum. Its Latin name, it means cultivated onion. That's not very exciting. It doesn't give us a lot of clues about its history, besides that people grew it. And they did, a lot. Now, this is not a plant I include in the garden because of its beauty, but because of its place in food and in health. It's extremely important. Planting the cloves and then pulling up the robust bulbs is one of the gardening activities that I enjoy thoroughly. I believe it's one of those plants that really puts you in touch with the health and composition of your soil. You're seeing how big the bulbs are getting, and you're pulling out of that nice loamy soil. Now, the legends surrounding garlic are as positive as the legends surrounding parsley were negative. The entire ancient world loved garlic. The Romans had a saying, "One must be very suspicious of anyone who does not eat garlic." 2,000 years before Christ, the Sumerians were actively using the healing properties of garlic. The Egyptians revered garlic and used to swear on it, much the way some people swear on the Bible. So if they were promising something, they'd say, "I swear on this pile of garlic." Egyptian slaves were given a daily ration of garlic to keep them healthy and increase their strength and endurance. Garlic could be used basically as a form of currency in some eras. During the time of King Tut, 15 pounds of garlic would buy you a healthy male slave. And when King's Tut was opened up, garlic bulbs were found scattered throughout the rooms. And you'll all remember the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. And wandering out in the desert, they're complaining about the food that they missed back in Egypt. And one of the foods mentioned specifically in the Bible that the Israelites missed was garlic. The Greeks consumed large amounts before their Olympic Games and before going into battle, believing that it gave them extra strength. However, if you had eaten garlic, you were not allowed into the temple because you were they called you a rank rose, stinky rose. The early physician Hippocrates, who lived around 300 BC, recommended garlic for infections, wounds, cancer, even leprosy. Much later, during World War I, the Russian army physicians relied on garlic so heavily to help treat infections that it was called the Russian penicillin. And Louis Pasteur documented the antibiotic properties of garlic in 1858. When Hippocrates said, "Let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food," when I hear that, I always think garlic. He must have been talking about garlic. So while the ancients didn't have much folklore about garden placement, planting, associations with, death or something, garlic was absolutely revered for its health benefits and value. And current medical studies just keep reinforcing that garlic should be given a special place in your garden and in your kitchen, and with Halloween coming up, maybe a place on your front door just in case of vampires. Now, this next herb I have a special fondness for. This is hands down my favorite. It's beautiful in landscaping. It has many medicinal and food purposes. It's highly aromatic, and the history of the plant is interesting and entertaining. Greek and Roman gardens almost always contain one of these plants, and it continues to enjoy widespread popularity today. Rose marinus means dew of the sea. The name probably references its origins along the seaside regions of the Mediterranean and its small blue flowers. The plant is rosemary. Rosemary is always nice to interact with in the garden. Every time I walk by mine, I'll rub my hands on it. The plants produce the most wonderful aromatic oil. When adding rosemary to your garden, there are just a couple things that you need to consider. Tradition says you should never buy it for yourself, but that it should be received as a gift. When planting rosemary, you'll want to choose a place that is hot, sunny, and well-drained. And it's said that rosemary produces the best oil by suffering. So you'll want to put rosemary in a spot that would make most other plants wilt. And if you do this, she will reward you with wonderful, strong growth and fragrance. In the right spot, rosemary can be quite long-lived. But according to legend, rosemary will never live longer than 33 years and never get taller than 6 feet, which is the age and supposed height of Christ. I've never had a plant get taller than 4 feet or live longer than 4 years. And I live in downtown Madison, so that's kind of a good microclimate. Now, the Romans carried rosemary to all corners of Europe. And they had a saying, rosemary flourishes at the house of a strong woman. So you might want to gift one of these to a strong woman, But it's rosemary's protective properties that were known in medieval European folklore. It is a must-have to plant near your doorway. According to legend, creatures such as witches, goblins, cannot pass near a plant with needles without stopping to count them all. Now, clearly, this is a pain, so they'll go out of their way to avoid rosemary and other needled bushes or trees. So placing one near your doorway will ensure that you don't have to deal with witches or other evil creatures, which would probably be a pain. Well, health-wise, it's been known since the time of Nero that rosemary does actually provide real health protection. Current research confirms it's antibacterial, antiviral, antioxidant. In 1603, when the bubonic plague killed 38,000 Londoners, the demand for rosemary was so high that an armload of rosemary would cost as much as 6 pigs. Rosemary was constantly carried, worn, sniffed during times of epidemics. Several well-known Romans have recorded that it has an ability to support memory. In ancient Greece, the scholars would twine it in their hair and they would rub rosemary oil on their forehead to strengthen their memory. Shakespeare mentions rosemary in his writings. Ophelia says in Hamlet, "There's rosemary, that's for remembrance." Students have been known to take rosemary to their exams to help stimulate their recall during their tests. One thing you can do is drink kind of a tea made from your own fresh rosemary. That's a great way to enjoy the plant and stay sharp. You could also use a diffuser and have the scent go throughout your house. Bees will also enjoy this wonderful addition to your garden. Now, quickly, I'd like to touch on one last herb, basil. You can always find basil. It's always on one of the top 10 lists of herbs you should have in your garden. But what about its history? What did people use it for? What did they think about it? Well, apparently, mostly they argued about what it was for and whether or not it was good. Accounts in Egypt nearly 4,000 years ago mentioned growing basil. Basil's mentioned in records dating approximately 200 BC. Those records state it exists only to drive men insane. For the Greeks, and later for the Romans, it was associated with hatred. And in order for it to grow, the seeds had to be sown with swearing and ranting. I would not recommend this method for modern gardeners. I don't think your neighbors would appreciate that. Later, Europe was very divided on the subject of basil. Parkinson's 17th century herbal says it can produce a cheerful and merry heart. I agree. English physician Nicholas Culpeper said that basil could generate scorpions, possibly even inside someone's skull. The scorpion theory, I was able to trace it to an English physician who, while on holiday in Italy, he observed that if basil were placed under a stone, if you lifted up the same stone in 2 days' time, there would be a scorpion underneath it. It's very scientific. The plant's name, ocimum, comes from the Greek mythology associated with the character Osimus, who organized combat games in honor of their ruler. Legend says that when he was killed during one of these games, where he died, basil popped up. Now, the second part of the name, basilicum, means king or kingly. That could be because of the games were for the ruler. Now, basil comes in a huge variety of flavors and colors. So even if you just plant it for your foliage, it can provide interest. Of course, the bees will be pleased if you have more than one plant and you let one go to flower. I would do that, have one that I would let flower and one that I would keep for cutting and for culinary use. Some research shows that basil is good for tension and for headaches. I think that it's one of those plants that if you keep it in your garden and you tend it, you get to know it, then if you're needing it, then you'll instinctively turn to basil. If you have tension, all of a sudden you'll be wanting a basil salad. I think each of these herbs is like that, though. They have different things they offer, different health supports, and they can only help you if you get to know them, you bring them in, and start using them despite some of their personal baggage. Now, here, kind of at the end of my talk, I want to just let you know a couple things that we have here at Trimble County Library, ways that we try to connect people with planting and growing and encouraging native plants and local food independence. Every year, for Earth Day, we give away native fruit and nut trees. So I encourage you to come by here on Earth Day. The line always just blows my mind. It's a wonderful event. In spring, keep your eyes open for the Earth Day tree giveaway. What, I already said that. In spring, look for the plant exchange. Since you should receive rosemary as a gift, you should swing by. This will be a perfect time to be gifted one. I'll have plenty on hand. You can take some parsley starts. They'll have already made their trip to and from the underworld, and they'll be ready for you to plant. And there will be basil starts that you can add to your garden. No ranting or swearing required, which your neighbors will appreciate. I want to thank you for hanging out with me for a little bit. If you're interested in learning more about herbs, folklore, plant medicine, please stop by the Trimble County Library. We have some great books on the subject, and I'm sure I or one of the other librarians would love to help you out, love to help you find some books to get researching and planning. Thank you again for your time. I hope to see you all in the library soon. Thanks.